This is a review of basic verb tenses that are commonly used in English. It doesn't review all the verb tenses that you could possibly use, but the ones that you probably use most often. It is very important to remember in American English, verbs have many functions. Primarily, they do identify the action of a sentence. However, verbs also indicate how many are involved in the action, whether one person or object is involved or more than one. That's why we have singular and plural forms of verbs. Verbs also indicate the time period, meaning how long an action may last. In addition, verbs indicate whether an action has finished or has not yet begun. And verbs also indicate whether the subject is the doer or the recipient of the action. Now, this last one is not a tense indication, it is a voice indication. We have active voice, which means the subject does the action in the sentence, and we have passive voice, meaning the subject receives the action in the sentence. Consequently, it's very important to use the best tense and form of the verb when you communicate. In the following slides, we will look at how different verb tenses and voices communicate different ideas about actions. Simple present tense is used for facts, regular actions, and actions that you expect to continue indefinitely. If we look at the first sentence under active voice, we can see how this works. The militants fight for control of the government. This is an action that we expect to continue indefinitely. We are not predicting an end. People celebrate special days such as birthdays and anniversaries. This indicates a regular action, an action that happens habitually. Climate change causes a number of effects. This is considered a fact, a truth, so we use simple present tense. Now, when we use passive voice, we take the focus off who or what does the action, and we put the focus on who or what receives the action. So in present tense, this looks like the following. Control of the government is fought for by militants. Special days such as birthdays and anniversaries are celebrated. A number of effects are caused by climate change. Present progressive tense, or what some refer to as present continuous tense, describes an action that is temporary. This means you are predicting the action will change or end, whether the change or the end is directly stated or implied. So if we look at this in the sentences below, when we say the militants are fighting for control of the government, we are predicting that the fight will end at one point. We don't know when, but it will end. When we say people are celebrating Jason's birthday, yes, we are saying this is what is happening right now, but people will stop celebrating Jason's birthday at some point. Climate change is causing a heavy hurricane season. Right now, this is the impact of climate change, but this cause will end at some point in the future. Pause the slides to examine how these thoughts are expressed in passive voice. Simple past tense is probably one of the easiest to understand and use. It has a consistent form for singular and plural usage, and it refers to an action that occurred in the past and is now ended. So in active voice, the militants fought for control of the government. They are done fighting. People celebrated Jason's birthday. His birthday celebration is finished. Climate change caused a heavy hurricane season. It is no longer causing the heavy hurricane season. Pause the PowerPoint slides and examine how these ideas are expressed in passive voice. The application of future tense is pretty simple to understand. It refers to an action that has not happened yet, but is expected to happen in the future. However, using future tense is a little more complicated. There are at least two common forms of future tense: will plus base verb, or be plus going to plus base verb. You may have learned that there are some differences in usage of these two forms. However, In practicality, in reality, when we use the two forms, they mean almost exactly the same thing. What I will say is that in academic written English, it is more common to use will plus base verb than it is to use the progressive form of future tense. Pause the PowerPoint slides and see how future tense is expressed in active voice and passive voice. Present perfect tense is used when we want to talk about an action with a connection from the past to the present and possibly the future. Sometimes this connection can be a continuation of the action, but sometimes the connection is a continuation of the effect of the action instead of the actual action. For example, under the active voice sentences, the militants have fought for control of the government. This sentence indicates that the militants have stopped fighting, but the effect of the fight is still present today. If we wanted to indicate the militants started fighting in the past and continue fighting in the present, we would have used present perfect progressive. The militants have been fighting for control of the government. Since we used just simple present perfect tense, the fighting is over, the impact of the fight still exists. People have celebrated Jason's birthday. This is an action that has happened numerous times in the past, will happen in the present, and will continue in the future. Climate change has caused a heavy hurricane season. This is a sentence that indicates that we are in the middle of the hurricane season. So climate change has caused this starting in the past, is currently causing this now, and could possibly cause this into the future. Pause the PowerPoint slides and examine how these ideas are expressed in passive voice. Past perfect tense is easy to remember if you remember that it refers to two actions that are sequenced in comparison to one another. The first action is past perfect, and the second action is expressed in past tense. Let's look at our examples. In active voice, the militants had fought for control of the government before the election occurred. What happened first? The militants fought for control of the government. What happened second? The election occurred. Look at the next sentence. People had already celebrated Jason's birthday when his parents threw him a party. People celebrated Jason's birthday first, then his parents threw him a party. The third example. Climate change had caused a heavy hurricane season by the time the government established protections. Climate change caused the hurricane season first. The government established protections second. Pause the PowerPoint slides and examine how these ideas are expressed in passive voice. Before you go, pause the PowerPoint slideshow and make sure that you can answer these questions. What are the different functions of verbs? How can different verb tenses communicate different ideas about the actions of a sentence? How do active and passive voice affect the meaning of a sentence? There is a quiz, so make sure you are familiar with this information.